Good evening. I'm Michael Allen. I'm here with Public Affairs, Public Access Television. I'm going to be a host tonight as we talk. I'm also with Divest University of Houston, and we're going to have a conversation tonight about an issue which many in the public know nothing about and which fuels mass incarceration in our country. I'm here tonight with my guest, Nakia Winfield. To my left, she is a graduate student at University of Houston in the School of Social Work. Also, we're here with Julia Cramp, who's also a graduate student with Nakia at the University of Houston School of Social Work. And next to her is Karen Desenia Martinez. She's a recent UofH graduate and is an activist who works at SEIU. And on Skype from Oregon with Enlace International, we have Amanda Aguiar Shank, and she's a senior campaign organizer for Enlace International. We've been working with Enlace International with the national director, Danielle Castillo. Correct me with that name again, Amanda?
Daniel Carrillo.
Carrillo, yeah. I don't say it as well as she does, but we've been working with Daniel, and Daniel, as he does a lot, is traveling, and so we were fortunate enough to get Amanda to appear on the show with us tonight. Now, basically, what we've been doing is bringing this problem to the attention of the city of Houston. We began looking at this as a result of posts that we had been seeing on Facebook by Enlace and the news that Columbia University and University of California last year forced divestiture from prison investments in their universities. So we began looking at the University of Houston, and we found out they also have investments. And as a result, Julia and Nakia and I started working together on this almost a couple months ago. We've been working with Daniel pretty closely on it, getting guidance from him. And about a month ago, we started working with Karen. Karen has a lot of contacts in the immigrant reform community. She's got a lot of contacts at the university, and we've been working to put this together. Recently, 2 days ago, we had a conference at the university, and we brought our issue to the students there and got some positive feedback. And we have plans moving up till May 19th when the Board of Regents meets, when we plan to bring our stack of petitions and to bring our demands to what we would like them to do. Would anybody like to add anything to that?
In addition, when the Board of Regents next meets, which is May 19th, we're hoping to have some people testify so that the Board of Regents can hear from the student population as well as the population at large in order to get a better idea of what people think about their investitures in the for-profit prison system, hopefully getting them to take a second look at that and divest.
Great. What kind of money are we talking about?
Well, we have discovered that UofH has $2.2 million of its endowment fund invested in 4 large banks, which in turn are part of the Million Shares Club. They hold majority stock in CCA and GEO, which are the 2 largest for-profit prisons in the United States.
And that Million Shares Club, that's something that you, Amanda, that your people at Enlace came up with. What is that? Can you tell us what that Million Shares Club is?
Yeah, I would be happy to. Maybe now is also a good time to do a quick overview of how the campaign started. Would that help?
Yeah.
So the prison divestment campaign nationally is coordinated by Enlace and a steering committee of about 20 organizations representing immigrant and Black communities primarily. It was founded in response to some of the crippling anti-immigrant legislation that was sweeping the country around 5 years ago. A lot of that on the border, so I'm sure you all in Texas are pretty familiar with it. We started investigating what was behind some of that legislation. Specifically, we went to look at SB 1070 in Arizona, which was known as the Show Me Your Papers law. It basically gave regular street cops the responsibility to ask people on the street whether they had legal documentation and to turn them into ICE if they didn't have papers to be in the country. So what we found was that the private prison lobby was heavily behind SB 1070 and other anti-immigrant legislation across the country. And this is where we get back to the Million Shares Club, because the research that we did found that private prisons are powerful. They're a powerful for-profit lobbying entity, but that they absolutely do not act alone. And there are 3 pillars that hold up this industry and the push for mass incarceration and immigrant detention. One of those pillars is the prisons themselves. One of them is the politicians that they lobby that continue to promote tough on crime, anti-immigrant legislation against people of color in this country. And the third one is the investors. And this is really key. Investors provide massive lobbying power that private prisons don't have to get mass incarceration policies on the books. They provide lending, billions of dollars of lending for prisons. And prisons need that money to be able to build their facilities and operate. And those major investors have, it's kind of hard to overstate the amount of power that they have in the country right now. Those are people like Wells Fargo, like Ameriprise, who I know the University of Houston is invested in, and Bank of New York Mellon, so other powerful interests that you may know of. And what we learned is that without the support of those investors that have over 1 million shares invested in prisons, private prisons would be stopped in their tracks. They couldn't build, they couldn't lobby. And so the target of the National Prison Divestment Campaign really is those Million Shares Club members, and to get them to pull their support from private prisons, which makes the University of Houston divestment campaign so incredibly important.
Thank you, Amanda. You mentioned the impact of GEO and CCA on the immigrant community. I believe they predominantly run the detention centers for ICE. Do you know anything about that, Karen, about what ICE is doing with these private prisons?
Yes, actually. So ICE and is it GEO? I forget the name.
Yeah.
But they run like a lot of private prisons. And so a lot of that money too actually is from our tax money, from like, these people lobbying politicians. And so I first learned about this back in like 2012. I was actually writing a script, and I'm also undocumented. So right now I'm under DACA, which means that technically, like the money that I invest in my education, like my tuition, the money that I like used to work for at a coffee shop, and then go to school full time, it could go into deporting my own parents or people like me. In Houston, actually, right now, there's about 600 people per day being detained. It used to be that Arizona was the #1 detention hub in the U.S., but now it's Houston. So United We Dream is actually running a campaign to get money out of that too.
Yeah, you're right. This the University of Houston is a public university. Actually, I've looked at the numbers, and the public is supporting the University of Houston to the tune of $300 million this year alone. So they're taking tax dollars, your tax dollars, and they're applying them to the bills that Houston have. Now, the endowment fund, the way this works, the endowment fund invests $716 million. They have a pile of money they invest, and they take the dividends, and they also run the university. but everything goes into a common pool. But their part of the pool is dirty. They're investing, you know, the University of Houston, their rhetoric on their website, if you look at it, they're very proud of what they do for the community. Well, in this case, they're not doing a whole lot for one part of the community, and that's the poor part, or the Hispanic part, or the black part. You know, so the three of us, the four of us, we've decided to try to get them out of the prison business. It's actually shocking that nobody knows about this. But Enlace is involved on this divestiture program on several levels. One of them is universities, but they also have other levels on private pensions. And I believe you guys are involved in getting cities to divest from their holdings as well. This is a big, big, big problem in our country that nobody really understands. That I'm paying in to my 401k. They're taking that money and they're giving it to the prisons, these private prison companies, and they're locking people up on my money. It's our money that's going into this stuff. Is there any...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
That's right. And I think, like Karen is talking about, it's pretty shocking to realize that as taxpayers, but also as participants in universities, paying our student fees, as participants in cities, paying our taxes, as participants in unions, if we're lucky enough to have a union pension, that our money is going to lock up our own people. And this is a campaign that's led by people like myself and our team at Enlace, along with the steering committee, that has personal family experience of having our loved ones locked up or being locked up ourselves. And it's just completely unconscionable that we're participating in that system. I think that's why the campaign has been growing so fast. And you're right. I think there are a lot of different places where we can be divesting our money. I'm happy to talk more about that. I think that what we've seen in the last year is that the activism and really the radical outspokenness and courage of students is what's pushing this movement forward, and where some of the biggest victories have been. There were victories last year, starting in the summer at Columbia University, led by Black students there, where the $9 billion endowment of Columbia University was divested from prisons fully. And then, like you said, at the University of California, which has close to $100 billion. So this is the largest university pool of money in the country. Black students there at the African Black Coalition also led that divestment effort. Importantly, the campaign nationally is calling for divestment from prisons and also reinvestment in communities impacted by incarceration and left behind by the country economically. And so at the California State University, Los Angeles, Black students there successfully divested just in January, a couple of months ago. And to pair with that, they won reinvestment in Black students. They won a Black Scholars Hall. They won permanent investment in recruitment and support for Black students. They won a required course on race and ethnicity. And so the work that you all are part of at the University of Houston has far-reaching implications in terms of as people involved in these public spheres, how do we use our power and our decision-making to determine the priorities for where our budget is going and where our investments are going?
I agree. Nakia, you and Julia have been reaching out to students at UH. How is that going?
It's going well. We've got a lot of positive feedback. We've got people who want to be involved, which is excellent. But really, I feel that our biggest thing right now is education. There's a lot of people who don't understand how bad private prisons are. And they are of the idea that our system is just on some level, and that people are in prison for a reason, and it's a good reason, and you know these people should be kept out of society. But when we tell people that the for-profit prison industry has been really pushing minimum sentencing, 3 strikes laws, maintaining current drug laws or enforcing them even more. These are things where they're creating prisoners. It's not just that they're a private industry that's, you know, working with current number of prisoners. They're doing things that will create more people they're creating felons, really. They're making it so the prison population is much larger than it would be otherwise, and incarcerating people who absolutely shouldn't be there. And so to that end, even if you don't care about immigration, or if you're not worried about, you know, the plight of poor people or people of color, if you're worried about just on a very like libertarian, I'm just worried about my tax dollars, like we're incarcerating people, we're paying between like $31,000 and $94,000 per year, incarcerating people who should be out on the streets, who should be working, who should be paying back into the system. And when you take people off of the streets and you're incarcerating them, that means their kids need to go into CPS. That's other financial motivation for people to not want this to be happening. They're losing their houses, and they're not able to reintegrate into their communities when they come back. So I feel like just the education has been really, really helpful. Also letting people know that for-profit prisons just do almost all they can to exploit people. Like they've got contracts where they have a certain number of beds that you have to have filled. So if they drop down lower than 80% filled, the state or the government is still paying for those empty beds. And so they literally have quotas of prisoners to fill, and so people have to be in there, which is why I think they're detaining so many immigrants, why ICE is involved, because it's people to fill up those beds, and it happens to fall on poor people and people of color because we're the most vulnerable members of society, and in general people care less when we are locked up, unfortunately. So I feel like the education piece has been really, really good for people.
Thank you. Now, I was listening to you, and it hit me. The term I kept thinking is that they've started commodifying humans. They've made us commodities. And if you look at the numbers of those incarcerated in our country, the majority of them are drug cases, nonviolent crimes, and people suffering from mental illness. And yet we keep putting them in and putting them in. And my question was always, well, if someone has a drug problem and they get caught with, say, a pound of marijuana, and you throw them in jail, they can't afford bond, so they stay in jail, they lose their job, they probably lose their car, their family has to move somewhere else, their wife or husband has to get a second job, the kids suffer emotionally and financially, and this guy gets thrown in a box with a pit bull, somebody that's violent, that may need to be there. So who does this serve? Who does this serve? And then I realized it serves the guy who owns the box. In other words, the private prison companies, or the people that supply the health care, or the people that supply the food service, or the people that supply the telephones. But it does not serve the people. Julia, do you see a shift in our country away from serving basic human needs in our criminal justice system? I mean, can you speak to that?
I mean, yes, there have been some good things that have been happening in criminal justice, but for the most part, people who go to prison do not come out rehabilitated and ready to rejoin society. The whole issue of private prisons, while there is an argument that they're more cost-effective than government-run prisons, is not actually a good one. That's something that we come across actually quite often when we're talking to students and to the community. They want to know, well, isn't it better if we can privatize this and they'll be more cost effective, they won't have to deal with the bureaucracy and all the red tape. And then we tell them that these private prisons are actually being subsidized by the government, and the government is actually helping them make profits. So if a prisoner is becoming too expensive, or their health care costs are going past a certain level, the private prison will send them back to a federally or state-run facility because they're too expensive and they're affecting their bottom line. So there's a whole range of issues with private prisons and the way prisoners are treated. Another issue with private prisons is that they're not subject to the freedom of information requests because they're private entities, whereas public prisons or state-run prisons, they have to turn over information about what happens in their facilities when requested. So that's another thing that's been a major problem with private prisons. Yeah. It's hard to find out what happens in there.
Thank you, Julia. I agree. Now, Karen, I know they talked about Bill 1070 in Arizona, but here in Houston, I know I've been involved with several actions of people fighting the 287G law here in Texas. And is it your opinion that private prisons and the fact that they lobby so much to keep so many 34,000 beds in these private detention centers filled, that we have 287G and there's money that they're throwing at it to make sure that that doesn't change?
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned something really important earlier, and it's the intersectionality of issues, how one thing like affects the other, right? Like private prisons and immigrants, and like the way we view poor people, right? So 287G right now in Houston is being ran. Well, it's actually been part of the city of Houston for about a little bit more than 8 years now. So when Obama first came into office, he promised to do an amnesty, to do an immigration reform, and that's the reason why he got elected. And he could have actually passed it his first year, but he didn't. So and now Obama is known as the deporter-in-chief to our community. 1 out of 5 people in Houston is undocumented, so we're an easy target. I think about 40 to 50% in Houston is Latino or Hispanic. I mean, this money could easily go and be invested into education, but because I mean, the money is gonna go. It has to go somewhere, right? The money is there and it has to go somewhere. And in this case, it's just it's not going to the right places because the demographics in the U.S. are changing, and it's something we have to accept. We have to acknowledge. It's also a racial issue, and let me just say right now, I'm wearing my 5 for 15 shirt. I work for SEIU Texas, and we were doing like a lot of actions today because tax day is coming up. So we're also trying to hold big corporations accountable for, avoiding paying their taxes and holding people in poverty. And a lot of these people who work these jobs are immigrants, are women. So I mean, all of this is related, and that's why our communities are sticking together. And I'm glad we're doing things like this today.
Great, thank you. I don't know if any of the viewers noticed, but I'm the only man here. But it's something that I've noticed from working with activists for the last few years. Women are the most fierce and dedicated activists that I see. They're the first ones that'll stand up and take a stand and speak their mind. I'm not running men down, but I admire the women activists that I know, including all 3 of these ladies. Amanda.
If you don't mind, I could speak just a moment to that point that you were bringing up.
Sure.
Unless you've got something else pressing.
No.
Because I think there's a very relevant tie-in with all of this that Karen's bringing up. Texas is home to one of the most shameful instances of the private prison industry, which is the family detention facility at Dilley, which is a facility that is designed for women and children who are escaping economic violence, domestic violence, political persecution south of the U.S.-Mexico border. And so folks are coming up from Central America, from Mexico, and are being locked up with children as young as a few months old. And there's a lot known now about Dilley. It houses over 2,000 women and children. The children there lose weight, they get sick, they're not used to the food. The conditions of isolation and surveillance are very intense for young children. There have been suicide attempts by mothers. There have been hunger strikes. There was a letter sent last summer by 178 members of the House of Representatives asking ICE to shut this down, to shut down family detention, because it's one of the just most naked examples of the exploitation of women of color.
Yes.
And women who 5-10 years ago would have been treated as political refugees, as people who have valid asylum cases and credible fear, which they do. And now they're treated as people who should be, locked up behind bars, surveilled and controlled. And so I wanted to bring this in at that point. I think it gives even more significance to work on the border and in Texas. There's over a dozen CCA facilities. Corrections Corporation of America owns and administrates the Dilley facility on behalf of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And that's not the only one, but I think it really shows us the extent that these corporations are willing to go to, and that the political establishment is willing to go to at the expense of women of color for profit.
Yeah. And let me ask you real quick, have you been to Dilley by any chance?
Have I been to Dilley? No, our staff has been to Dilley. I have not personally.
Well, I went a couple of months ago, and really it's so reminiscent of concentration camps, like Nazi Germany. Like you go and there's this big tower where, there's police and, they can see like everything that moves around. There's a big field in between like the highway or freeway, the road and the actual detention center. So you can only get so close and everything's just like boarded up. There's no windows. I mean, I cannot imagine how anybody would let children, right? And we're doing it, and people don't know. There's like, little babies and moms there. It's really horrible. I mean, just to paint you that picture.
Is it in any way different than being incarcerated that you were able to tell, besides the fact that there are children there?
No, not at all. I mean, it's a prison, There's no, it's not colorful or anything. It doesn't look inviting at all. It's boarded up. There's cops just like patrolling, and there's like big buses coming in at different times of the day with people, like full of people, full of kids and women. It's not right.
It's something that we recently learned, Nikki and I, is that ICE's budget has a mandate from Congress that they detain 34,000 immigrants on a daily basis, which really sort of helps you to understand why so many people are going into those facilities, because they have to. Yeah. They're supposed to be detaining people and supposed to be bringing them there.
They're easy targets. Like, they're the easiest target right now.
Yeah,
I also don't think that, like a young kid should get incarcerated for like having pot in his or her car, right? Like, we could divest that money into facilities that can help, these kids like get their life together and not put them into jail.
I think one thing that's really important that the Dilley facility shows is that these prison corporations and their backers are willing to go to any extent to make profit off of our bodies and the bodies of people of color. And you brought up a really good point, Nikia, that it is just the same, and that private prisons have contributed on the criminal justice system, have contributed to the 500% increase in incarceration in the last 30 years. And so, we can talk about the Dilley facility and women and children as maybe, a really extreme outlier, but this is indicative of the ethic that they operate under, which is incarcerating people of color and incarcerating them in really subhuman conditions. We know that 40% of people caught up in the criminal justice system are African American. And we know that half of women, a full 50% of women who are incarcerated in the country are Black. And that prisons have contributed to the expansion of targeting specifically of Black youth under the drug wars. And that has grown. We know that people in private prisons are overwhelmingly people of color, much higher rates than in public prisons, and overwhelmingly young, because that's who the new targets are of this prison expansion. So we kind of see the industry expanding in many different ways when it comes to incarceration, and taking in all kinds of communities that are being damaged and hurt, and whose families are being impacted as a result. So I thank you for kind of throwing that question in there to, I feel like, bring it back to what we're talking about, which is that immigrant detention and mass incarceration are two sides of the same coin right here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe you had more, I don't know, I maybe extrapolated a lot based on your question, so maybe you have more to add.
No, to me, it was just really highlighting the fact that we're not detaining people, we're incarcerating them. And we're breaking apart families in order to do it. And these are people who haven't committed any crime. They're being incarcerated for who they are, which is a really horrible thing, obviously.
You know, I never wanted to be the old guy that tells stories about when I was young. But when I was young, I can remember the police, chances are, if you got pulled over and you had drank too much, and they knew you because police were from the neighborhoods they patrolled, they would have you park your car and they would drive you home. And they would tell you, when you get up in the morning and you're sober, go get your car. If you got in trouble, if you shoplifted something as a kid, as a minor, chances are they would put you in the back of the police car and take you to your parents and tell them what you had done. There was a human connection back then that we're losing. Money, I think we'd all agree, money is driving the system. The reason ICE is instructed to produce those 34,000 detainees and make sure these beds are filled is because these companies have minimal bed guarantee clauses. In other words, if they don't fill 90% of those beds, they can sue the government. Money is driving everything now. Money is driving the incarceration system, the criminal justice system, detention. It's driving anything. And human connection has been lost in our country. So my question is, how do we change this as a nation? And I know people say, oh, well, we get Congress to change it. But I hate to say it. Congress, for the most part, has been bought and paid for by groups such as American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. That is the face of evil in this country. People don't realize it. They have a campaign to where they try to control the state houses in every state. They're in Austin with politicians in their pocket. They're in every state capital with politicians in their pocket. They realize that they could control what happens in this country by controlling what happens in each state's capital. So money is running this thing. How, as a nation, do we change this?
Right? Yeah, those are the tough questions. So we definitely have to stick together. I think we are moving we're moving on the right path.
Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like we have a phone caller. Is that what you're saying, Mark? Go ahead. You're
hello.
Hello. You're live on air.
Great. I have a question, and there's waves of immigrants, undocumented kids coming across the border. What would you suggest? I'm not in favor of putting people in prison, but what would be the alternative? I mean, it's not hundreds, it's not thousands, it's tens of thousands coming across. What should we do with them?
Okay, I can answer your question. First of all, it's not tens of thousands. Immigration has been dramatically reduced because of how people are being handled in the U.S. Another thing would be we've had immigrants coming to this country forever, I think the thing that you're not really bringing up is that it's a race thing. Like, there's little brown kids coming into the country, and this country does not want them. Now, you have to look at foreign policy. Like, the U.S. has so much influence. It has established so many dictatorships. Like, the reason why there's gang violence in El Salvador and Honduras, where, like, you know, these kids are coming from, is because we exported gang members. So I think as a nation, we have to take responsibility of what we are doing and how we are handling our foreign policy.
Yeah, I'm an educator, and I teach in a school where we have so many students that don't have parents. They come across the border without their mom or dad. I had to take a little bit of an exception that it seems like we're characterizing our country as totally heartless towards the kids. When the kids arrive at school, they're handed a laptop. They have loving teachers. They have social services. They're not rejected. Rather, they're accepted in our schools. And they have courses and classes where they can learn English. So, yeah, I know there's people out there that want to exploit and make money. Also, other people out there in parts of our government or people that work for it that are in fact supporting these kids and these people in the country, documented or not. Just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very valid, and I'm glad, you know, you're educated. I think the reason why there's no respect for a lot of people of color and stuff is because there's like a huge anti-intellectual movement in the U.S. So people are not really informed as to what is happening. It's easier to just complain about people coming in, especially if they look different from you, rather than, like, you know, really seeing what's happening and how our politicians are acting outside and within the country. Let's be real.
Well, regarding foreign policy, I'm not going to talk too much. In the 80s, our government butted into the civil wars in Central America, late 70s and 80s, when the Central American governments, Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, were trying to, the people rose up and were trying to take control of the governments, and we butted in and got in the way of all that. And so the oligarchs are back in power down there, and that's why the people there's the system. It's a broken economic systems down there. So I say bring them all. You know, we're part of the problem down there.
Thanks
for listening to me.
I think the caller made a good point when he said there are good people in this country. We bring these children in, we educate them. We're not wholesale across the board antagonistic to undocumented workers. But there are parts of our government that have figured out how to make money off of them, that are going after them. And our politicians are in line with them. They keep passing more draconian and more draconian laws. You know, not only for undocumented workers, but for American citizens as well, so that they can keep these prisons full, because they figured out a way for private enterprise to make money off of people being behind bars. How do we change this as a nation? I guess that's too big a question. How do we, as activist organizations, change this? What do we do? What do you do, Amanda? What do you encourage people to do? This is a problem that our politicians don't want to deal with it because they're making money with the way things are. But we, as the people, have to do something. What do we do?
That's why, going back to what I was talking about in the beginning, we see that it's crucial to break this this three-legged stool of the prison corporations, the investors, and the politicians. As long as the money is flowing and the influence is flowing in those three circles, we're going to get the same kind of outcomes that we've been talking about and the same kind of impacts on Black and brown communities in this country. And so the campaign is designed to strategically break the economic and political power and links behind this industry and shift the debate nationally on private prisons. Fortunately, you know, Corrections Corporation of America and Geo Group, the two biggest prison companies in the United States, they're publicly traded, right? So they have to produce investor reports. And they list in their investor reports that the major barrier to their stability is that the public has not yet fully accepted the idea of for-profit private incarceration. And that's us, right? That's the general population. We also know that there's dozens of events happening next week for the Week of Action on Prison Divestment. That's a week of action that targets the tax breaks that prisons are getting based on congressional rule. They had incorporated as real estate investments, so as real estate investment trusts. And through that tax designation, they're saving, or they're stealing from taxpayers $113 million a year. And so we'd like to get rid of those tax breaks. And just like, you all in the university, folks in Columbia University, folks at University of California, the city of Portland had a unanimous recommendation in February to divest from Wells Fargo because of their investments in prisons. So I would say that if we're sounding hopeless about the state of private incarceration and mass incarceration in general, that is absolutely not the case. What we're feeling is that there's a tidal wave movement of people who are ready and willing to do something about this, and that the majority of people in the country are on our side. And as far as the tax breaks, maybe I'll just mention to folks that there is a petition up with MoveOn.org. You can find it if you go to tinyurl, so that's tinyurl.com/no prison tax breaks. So tinyurl.com/no prison tax breaks. And so this is the national push to remove those tax breaks from private prisons. And, it's something that the general public, folks, man or woman on the street, supports. And so I would say that's one of the strengths of this movement.
I would also say that if you're talking about what can you do, thinking small is a really big deal. For a normal protest, you would boycott, right? But you can't really boycott which prison you're going to go to. Be like, I would like to go to the public one instead. So in this case, requesting and trying to force divestment is one of the things that you're able to do. Like, we as students, we're like, what is the power that we have? How can we leverage our power as students in order to see what we can do about changing where the money is going in our university? And I mean, being able to speak to the university's values. It specifically says on their webpage that, they value the quality of life in Houston and the state of Texas, that they want to identify and respond to social, economic, and cultural challenges here. That's not being embodied in where they're putting their money. So literally putting your money where your mouth is and trying to leverage your membership in an organization in order to achieve that goal. So I feel like Divest UH is an example of something that we can do at a local level. Also demanding that your politicians be in line with your views, demanding that not just your president, but the people who are lower on the ballot, your mayor, people who are representing you in the Senate, in the state Senate, in the state House, make sure that they have this on their agenda, and let them know that you're going to withhold your vote or vote for the other team if that's not the case.
You've got some experience with working with legislators in Austin, I understand. And what is your feel for them? If we come up to them and we tell them, we want you to back off on some of these tax breaks and these things you're doing for these universities, and be aware of this and take legislative measures to kind of put the brakes on this, do you think that they would be willing to listen, knowing that Alex supports this situation?
So I think that states in the South are definitely unique in that there are a lot of places in the South where there are prisons where that's the entire economy for some of the locations here in the South. And so it's definitely a little bit harder, but what you do is you politicians have a job, and that job is to serve their constituents. And if their constituents are loud enough, if you get a number of people together to say, hey, you won this last election by 800 votes. Well, me and my 400 friends are going to vote a different way. So you really you make them weigh what are the benefits and the consequences to listening to what you have to say, and really it has to be a power play that is that strong, because all of the furniture that's in the Texas Capitol, it's made by prison labor. I was on the corrections committee for this last legislative session, and it was the nicest committee that they've had in a while. They really focused on trying to prevent recidivism, but they weren't interested in trying to prevent people from coming into jail in the first place. That's not what they were doing. So it is, the prison industry definitely has its claws in the South, but you really have to get people educated. You have to work locally. You have to meet your neighbor. You have to invite folks on the very local level to come in and fight this fight with you. And you need to make it important and relevant to them, because it is. Even if you are as far away from the prison system as you can possibly be, unless you are directly invested in it and making that money, it's still totally relevant to you. That's money that's coming out of your pockets as a taxpayer. And honestly, even if you are invested in them, they're still taking more money out of our common pool of funds as taxpayers than you're going to be getting from your investment.
Thank you. Julia, I know since we've been doing this that you've talked. Well, you're probably like me, and I assume Nakia too. We talk to a lot of people about what we're doing. What is your general feel? And I know that you've recently made connections with a group of millennials that are organizing in Houston that may even be beyond their student days. But what is the feel? What is the pulse? What is your feel for how millennials look at this and whether they're interested in getting involved? Because face it, in Houston, it looks like we're going to have the activist community in general involved in this to make this change happen. Unfortunately, this time of the year, a lot of students are, their heads are in the books. They're not interested in doing anything except passing their courses and going home. But what is your feel in the general millennial community about this issue?
Well, I did recently join Houston Millennials, which is a new group of millennials who are young professionals and who have started getting together, and a lot of them are very concerned with social justice issues. So I've found that in talking to them and in communicating with them through social media, most of them are very receptive to the issue of private prisons in general. They already kind of have a base knowledge of what the problems are, and then are open to learning about UofH's involvement in the private prison industry. I found that when we ask them to sign a petition, they go ahead and sign it. They're curious to learn more. So it seems like the younger generation is more aware of the issues and more open to doing something about it.
Fantastic. I was going to ask you the same question, Karen. Even though I know you're also associated with this millennial organization that's coming up, but I'm also interested in the immigrant reform community, because I work with some of them, and I know when I tell them about what's going on with private prisons in the University of Houston, their jaws drop. They did not know about this, and they seem to be very concerned. What's your feel?
Well, I am happy to say that the Black and Brown community, I feel, are making really good steps to working together in Houston, which makes me very happy. I am friends with some of the millennials who are heading this this movement of unifying Black Lives Matter and the United We Dream folks. And yeah, the millennials are also like really great people. We host mixers once a month where we, network with each other and sometimes, give each other like businesses and then pass out flyers about the events that we're having. And so we're hoping to help out more. Our goal as millennials is to help each other out and to build our community. to make people feel at home, because right now the city of Houston is changing, and so we have all these developers coming in, and people of color are getting pushed out, and we can't afford the $1,000 now to live in the city when the city's like plagued with minimum wage jobs that pay no more than $10 an hour. But yes, I think things are heading in a very good direction. United We Dream wants to end 287G by this June. It's up to Sheriff Ron Hickman and the Commissioners Board to end this by June. They can easily do it, just say no. So yeah, and I think it's very possible. So
that's great. I believe that this is gonna be. I know what happened. I know what happened at Columbia, Amanda. With the students pushing this thing and really driving it. And I know what happened at UC. I've talked to Anthony several times with the African Black Coalition. But in Houston, I don't know. It seems like the paradigm here is a little bit different. I know at the University of Houston, it seems to be a lot of focus on getting your degree and not getting involved. But I will tell you something that shocked me when I was looking at the numbers. Only 51% of the people at the University of Houston can expect to graduate. 51%. So there's something going, recently, I don't know if you realize this, University of Houston stepped up to a Tier 1 level. Nakia could probably talk more about that. So we think they're sensitive about how people perceive them, and that's what we're trying to work on. Would you like to talk about that, Nakia? Or
do you want to speak on it?
I just wanted to point out something that Nakia and so we're students at the university, and U of H is actually the second most ethnically diverse major research university in the United States. So that's actually something to be really proud of, that we're at a university that has such ethnic diversity. It's very cool. You get to meet so many people from all different walks of life. But that's what makes their investment so unpalatable, that they're investing indirectly in private prisons that lock up Black and Brown, the Black and Brown community, people who are economically disadvantaged, and yet that's the very population that U of H is so proud to serve. And not only that, U of H is located in the 3rd Ward, which is, 80% of the residents in the 3rd Ward are of color. So that's something that we always want to bring up when we're talking about this issue.
It's true.
Good points.
I feel like the university is in an opportune place to be able to reach out to that community and help that community, but instead it's using its funds to further just really decimate the community by encouraging locking them behind bars, which is really upsetting. But yes, the University of Houston did just recently become a Tier 1 university and is very, very proud of its new status, and is trying to project that information as far as it can possibly can, which I totally understand. I mean, like, Tier 1 is a really, really big accomplishment, but it also, I feel like, it's very cliche, but with great power comes with great responsibility. And so as a Tier 1 university, I really feel that we need to be looking at where our money is going. Like, that's a no-brainer. I feel like when you're dealing with millions and millions of dollars of money from either the students or the surrounding community that are being donated so that those funds can enrich the community, both of 3rd Ward, of Houston, of Texas as a whole, of the nation, then I feel like you really need to make sure that you are careful with where that money is going and putting it towards places that embody your values. So I feel like pressuring them at this point is really important because of that new Tier 1 status.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're vulnerable because of their vanity. That's what I'm really counting on helping us here. But what I'd like to ask you, Amanda, before we close, I know there's, I came across a list of about 4 other universities around the country that listed on Enlace's webpage that are also in the midst of campaigns. Could you speak to that for a couple of minutes, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of the things that we need to always be bringing to the table in these times is that we are in the middle of a moment that where Black Lives Matter has completely changed the dominant narrative around race in our country, and continues to grow, and where the 15 Now movement, and even going back to the Occupy movement, has changed the narrative around how we look at economic equity. Where we have coming out of Texas, you know, you all are in such a strategic place because of the immigrant rights conversations coming out of Texas, the role of immigrants in our country, the deferred action for parental arrivals decision coming out of Texas, now being decided at the federal level, you know, with some really important dates just next week. These are conversations that really get to the role and the heart of who is our country and who deserves the protection of the state, who deserves the benefits that the state has to offer. And I think that you all being located, like you said, in a university that is so proud of being ethnically diverse, and in a community that's so ethnically diverse, is just so strategically located to be able to be doing this work. Similar to the work that I mentioned coming out of Oakland, which is where the University of California Regents meet in downtown Oakland. You know, the African Black Coalition, many students who are from Oakland, which is a rapidly gentrifying city, and who are part of the University of California, which is something like 4% Black, University of California at Berkeley. And, you know, so what we see, I think, in all of the university divestment campaigns is that powerful students of color are reclaiming what should be what is ours. You know,
I'm sorry, Amanda. We're about to
these public institutions.
I'm sorry, Amanda. We're about to run out of time. I want to thank you for joining us via Skype.
Thank
and,
you.
And I know I speak probably for all of us. We look forward to talking to you more via email or over the phone. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Nakia and Julia and Karen for joining us tonight and having this conversation. I think Nakia hit the nail on the head when she said what we have to do is educate people. And that's what we're doing. Even if we aren't successful in this campaign, we will have opened some eyes and some minds to what is going on in this city and in this country. And with that, I just want to thank all of you out there for joining us tonight. And if you're interested in this, I suggest you go to Facebook, Divest, University of Houston. You can see what we're doing to work on this. And message us, join us, because we're in a fight and we need all the soldiers we can get.
Sign our petition.
And sign our petition, yes. And thank you very much. It looks like we've got 1 minute, but anybody got any closing statements?
Just to clarify, we are asking the University of Houston to divest all UH funds from the for-profit prison industry. We're asking them to enact UH policies so that they will not invest in the future, and issue a public statement denouncing the industry and pledging never to invest in it again. So that's what our petition says. If you go to Divest UofH on Facebook, then you'll be able to see it there. Thank you.
Yes, sign our petition. Any closing remarks, ladies?
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this, and we hope to partner with the community and in our campaign.
Absolutely.
Karen?
Thank you so much for listening.
And thank you from us.